You have the order in front of you, I believe, and I see Ashley has been very diligent. Good morning, or afternoon, sorry. Seems like morning for some reason.
Sometimes. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Settle in here. Okay.
Welcome back.
Appreciate it. Thank you. It's an
Yes.
honor. I'm glad to be back here.
Okay, well, it's our pleasure. We have pretty much the same procedure as before. I'm still wearing a mask, which is because it has now been a week and 1 day.
Sure.
Better safe than sorry, I guess. But I thought I would explain that. I will begin the questioning, Bryan, with the one that is labeled number 4. It's the 4th item on the agenda. So here it is. Since your first interview, is there anything you have thought of that you wish you had told us? In addition, is there anything you did speak to in your first interview but wish to elaborate upon further?
You know, just thinking about that from our last meeting here, Monday night, it seems like it was yesterday. One of the questions, because we were kind of running out of time there at that hour mark, was one of the questions was, what are you looking for besides the leadership profile? You as individual board members have your own opinions on what you want for leadership, and I'm sure you've listened to the stakeholders and the surveys. But one of the questions was, what are you looking for out of a person in general for your superintendent? That was just kind of an open-ended question that I was like, I didn't get a chance to ask you that question. Is now the time to do that, or should I hold off on? Yeah, go ahead. So if anybody wants to chime in about that question, that'd be great.
Somebody that's approachable, but not only by the community, but by the administration, teachers, things like that. Good communicator with all facets of the community.
Yeah. Good communicator?
Yes.
Excellent.
I would say someone who has integrity, honesty, and transparency, who's strategic and a good communicator.
Okay.
Yeah, fine. Basically someone that can continue some local relationships.
Sure.
Build on and find new relationships. Be very active in our local elderly community.
Okay.
A number of things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very proud of the fact that we're in good financial condition.
Yes, you are.
I would be very interested in continuing that.
Mm-hmm.
I too am very, as a former teacher myself, very aware of how important it is for good communication and good support of people in the classroom and all those that support our program. And the issue of mental health once again seems to be plastered in front of us nationally.
Yes, sir.
Is an ongoing concern.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Kim?
Yes, thanks. Great question. I feel like lead by example.
Yep.
So not expecting anything from staff and faculty that you wouldn't do yourself.
Oh,
and
good.
Then just really strong relationships with the
Sure.
board and with the people that you serve, the community and the staff, faculty, and most of all, the students.
Very good.
Pretty much what everybody else has said, but I would also say that the collaboration is very important, and then the ability to have empathy when working with all different sectors in the community,
Yes.
whether it be staff, administration, or the community, parents, and others.
Mm-hmm. Angie?
And I also would agree with what everybody has said, but what comes to mind is somebody who's a strong leader who isn't going to be walked all over
Yeah.
and can make tough decisions, but is still going to be very willing to work with all types of perspectives and people and be a unifying force. And being able, someone who's able to work with people who disagree with them in a good faith manner, so.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. And to answer the second part of the question, is there anything you did to speak of that I didn't elaborate on? I think one of the things, and it kind of appeals to your senses from what I'm hearing, just downstairs I was waiting, actually when I was walking into the school, there was a couple with their little girl walking in. I said, oh, and I was kind of joking around. I go, are you here to come to the exciting superintendent interview? And they're like, no, we're here for graduation. I said, oh, preschool graduation. I said, well, I used to be a preschool teacher. And their princess, she had a nice dress on. And we walked in together and I got to see and watch the preschool graduation. And I had 4 preschool graduations today in my district in 2 different buildings. That's one of the difficulties of being a dual-rolled superintendent and elementary principals. I oversee K through 6. Sorry, Tribune, but you had it wrong. It's K. You put K through 4 in there. I'm K through 6 principal. So I oversee 2 different buildings with hundreds of kids. And it's hard. And I think that's one of the things that helped me stand out is that I've had to wear these multiple hats for 5 years now during a pandemic. But with that said, one of my attributes that I'm proud of is that I can communicate from all age levels, from preschool through 12th grade and into adulthood. I can adapt to just about any learning environment. And it was a joy just to watch the preschoolers downstairs. And as I was scrolling through my Facebook feed today, I noticed it was 12 years ago today that my oldest daughter graduated preschool. So I felt really old when I realized that. So it was really ironic. But that's a big step when preschoolers are graduating. And it's a big step when they graduate high school, too. And I've had the honor of not only teaching preschool, but while I was in Lyle, I actually hired 2 paraprofessionals that were my very first students when I was a preschool teacher 20 years ago. So anywho, I think that kind of summed up that first question, I think. Thank you.
All right, Bryan, what do you consider to be your proudest accomplishments as an educator?
I'm very proud of my career. Even in social settings, if we go on vacation, I'm striking up a conversation with a stranger. When they ask what I do, usually I don't say I'm a superintendent principal. I simply say I'm an educator. That's an occupation that I will forever hold, because we are all educators that work in the public school system. My proudest moment, I think back at my career teaching different grade levels. So when I left teaching early childhood, I went from teaching preschool to teaching social studies at the residential treatment program in Austin at Girard. And we had children from all over the world, all walks of life, various backgrounds. We had students from Africa, Russia, Canada, Mexico, Japan. A lot of people don't realize that school, that institution in Austin, which is the only one of its kind in the state of Minnesota, that we serve multiple countries, I guess you might say. Majority of the students while I was there were from the Midwest, but occasionally we would get students from, again, other countries. I had one student in particular while I was participating in targeted services, which is after-school programming, and I had a boy who hated reading. You couldn't get him to read any type of textbook or anything. But what I was able to do with him after school was, by building a relationship with him, I discovered his interests, which were like monster trucks and planes and trains. And so and this boy was, I think, 13. He also didn't know how to ride a bicycle either, and we were able to teach him how to ride a bicycle at age 13. But the proudest moment was I got him to read for the first time in his life, and he was 13. And I was able to get him to open a book. But it started simply with just picking out a book, reading the front cover, explaining what an author is and a publisher. But it had to be something he was interested in. And that was the beauty, too, of Read 180, which was the intervention that we'd use. The books appeal to the child's senses. I mean, many of us, I think, don't really like reading something that's boring or something that doesn't spark our interest level. Just looking back, in fact, I was just telling the story, even though it was 12 years ago when this happened, I still remember it. It's still ingrained in my memory that even though I wasn't a specialized reading teacher, I've never been an interventionist. I always taught elementary education and social studies. But I tried it one summer, and I was able to get through to a child, and that was a huge aha moment. And I think that's what keeps us all in the field, even though the last couple of years we've seen a lot of educators and administrators leave the field. What keeps a lot of us going is, besides the smiles on the kids' faces, is experiencing those aha moments with the students, and that's probably the proudest moment in my career is when I was able to get him to read.
I forgot that I'm up next with the question. All right. So how have you empowered employees to be independent thinkers while at the same time instilling in them a sense of accountability? Give an example of how your strategies have led to a new idea or way of doing business.
So in a previous district, excuse me, I'm still trying to, the pollen count is high. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that lately. My previous district I was in, when I arrived, their special ed population was the highest probably in southern Minnesota. It was roughly 36%, so about 1 in every 3 kids. I was notified of that prior to arrival by the special ed director. And so what I did was I assembled, we had a faculty meeting, and we basically looked at our MTSS system, the multi-tiered systems of support. We looked at what we were doing during our PLCs, what type of data were we studying. And so when we looked at it, because what I found out was some of the teachers were referring students to special ed services without having at least 30 days of data from research-based interventions, which, we have to do that. Johnny was sitting under a desk in the classroom, wasn't learning, and, well, we need to refer him. There must be something wrong. That's not how that works. We have to keep trying, because from a fiscal standpoint, what the superintendent had on, I'm looking at this like, oh my goodness, the cross-subsidy, the cost of all these referrals, that's nuts. We can't sustain this any longer. What the principal had on, at the same time, I'm looking at, okay, what are we doing with our referral process? We have to streamline this more, and then we have to bring in more of that mental health component and bring in a sound social worker that can do that. And we were blessed in that district with a couple of social workers during my tenure that did amazing things. So we overhauled that system. I empowered the teachers by showing them the data. We used fast bridge assessments that was developed by a gentleman out of the University of Minnesota right here in our state. And we utilized that data. We did monthly progress monitoring, and we were able to figure out what made those kids tick. And a lot of times, receiving the mental health services, they ended up not being referred. So that started in 2017. While I departed from that school district, that number went down to 22%. So it was a significant reduction, and it obviously also saved the district a lot of money. And as a special ed teacher, a former special ed teacher too, with IEPs and goals, the other thing too that I empowered teachers and empowered students was to realize that those goals are meant there for achievement. We need to achieve those goals, and the goal of special education is kind of, to get out of it. We want to achieve those goals and move on. But getting those teachers to sit down, to let them talk, it's not I think I said this on Monday night, it's not a one-man show. We want people working together and collaborating. And that's actually, by default, it's also a way of building trust, too, is getting people to sit down and create goals, smart goals, and then achieve those goals, much like we expect our students to. We expect staff to do that, too. I think I answered it. Yeah.
Okay, Brian, provide us with some specific examples of how you would implement a support system for students, staff, and families experiencing stress and mental health issues.
Specific and mental health, experiencing stress. I think through my networking skills, having a lot of good friends that have psychology degrees and PhDs in child psychology. In fact, one of my references I put down is a doctor. Making sure that those resources are readily available, and that we can publish those resources in the newsletter, Home with Them. And especially in light of what's happened this week, that's definitely brought to the forefront the need for mental health. examples that I've done in the past, I shared a little bit of this Monday night, and it was a testament on how we were able to get kids back in the schools. When we had a traumatic event happen at our school building, when I deployed the 4 mental health agencies, what they did was they did site-based mental health. We reserved classrooms for these 4 agencies. One ended up staying there. I believe it's still there to this day. It saved families money, which reduces stress. It increased test scores, it decreased behaviors, it increased attendance. We have parents now that are coming into the school, meeting with these mental health experts with their children in the school building in a self-contained classroom so they're not bothered. We also have to be logistical with that, so we protect the data privacy of the families. It is a win-win, especially since it's a remote school that I was in previously. It's been very hard now in my current district because we had 2 full-time positions posted for about 15 months. We just contract with Family Services out of Rochester. We just hired somebody finally last week. We can't find anybody. It's been very difficult. And I've seen the direct results of having that absence in our schools when we haven't had an MHP. Behaviors increase, attendance decreases. It's just the opposite effect. And we had that data to show in my previous district, circling back to what I was saying, we had that data that showed that these families expressed very much a lot of gratitude towards administration and our local social worker because they no longer had to pull the child out of school for an entire day to go to Mayo and Rochester. So that reduced a lot of stress. And we had kids exiting out of special ed services because we were providing those services on site. Family engagement nights, we've done those through title services using those funds. Popcorn, movie nights, we've done that. The more you can bring families into the school and get them involved, targeting marginalized groups of families, our protected classes, making sure that they are feeling welcome and involved in the community and the school. As, you know, in rural Minnesota, the districts are the beacon of activity for the community, and we need to make sure that everybody is welcome to attend. And so that is all combined with that component of mental health, and it reduces it. Support systems, working with multiple counties. I've probably worked in conjunction with 6 or 7 counties in southeastern Minnesota over the years, knowing and working with all the directors of the Health and Human Services, working directly I've met with the director of MDH, contacting them and making sure that we are all collaborating. I've also sat on committees for the Moore County Collaborative and now currently with the Goodhue County Collaborative, and we're always brainstorming ways how we can help families. Even as recently as this year, rental assistance, getting that word out to families that there are services. A lot of families don't know that there's a lot of resources out there, and with the pandemic and the financial crisis that a lot of families are in, because of inflation and the way the economy is going, it is even more imperative that families know that they can access those resources. So I, as a superintendent, have to make sure that I maintain those exceptional relationships with those people that are driving those engines and making those things happen. And on top of that, also communicating with our state legislatures, because they know that we're the boots on the ground. So I need to make sure that they understand that these are our needs in Albert Lee area schools. That means I'm in contact with Gene Dornick and Peggy Bennett. I'm saying, hey, I need you guys to introduce a bill. We have families in need. This is what they're communicating with me, and I need you guys to act upon this. And I was very frustrated. I think I shared that money. I was very frustrated with the outcome over the weekend. So they need to make sure that I do bark sometimes, and it's because I'm advocating for kids and families.
Bryan, how would you lead our district in navigating through controversial issues? How would you approach a board meeting that is filled with upset members of the public?
Oh, this doesn't happen, does it? Yeah. As a superintendent, I'm in the firing line. I am the public relations person for the district. You know, I've talked to superintendents that have been superintendents for 1, 2, 3 decades. Some of them have been retired, and they've said to me, I can't imagine being a superintendent in the last 5 years. What you have had to endure, we didn't have to endure that. We have gone through so much as educators, as elected officials, as superintendents. our names get dragged through the mud all the time. Social media, people attack us. How we handle that as a board liaison, as a superintendent, that is a direct reflection of the district. So we best be careful. I've told many leadership teams over the years, including my staff, we have to be very careful how we communicate with people, but it also has to be purposeful. So if someone's emailing you and trying to poke the bear, it's just like when we were kids. If someone's trying to poke the bear, how are you going to react to that? Are you going to react in writing so it's permanent and public knowledge and can be retrieved at a moment's notice? No, we're going to sit down and have a conversation. And I found out that when we have hot topics and someone's targeting me or one of you and they're trying to CC me into it, I'm saying, okay, that's fine. You have some concerns. I'm listening to you. Your opinion is valued. Why don't we schedule a meeting and we can talk about that? And usually sometimes they kind of back out. But we have to handle these situations very carefully because it is a direct reflection of leadership and it's a direct reflection of the district, especially when you are the face of the district. So when I've mentored teams and staff and employees, I've always walked them through how to respond to people or groups of people. We also have to maintain order as a democracy. What we're doing right now is a democratic process. Nobody has the right to disrupt that. None of us can walk onto the House floor or the Senate floor up in St. Paul and start barking or yelling and screaming. You can't do that. A school board meeting is no different. So we have to maintain order, but we can do that with grace and listening, because if someone's that emotional and they're trying to get our attention, we need to hear their story. But how, when, and where in a safe environment, that's kind of how we decide that. We decide that. But voices should be heard. We just have to be, make sure everyone's safe, I guess. And then walking through that communication in leadership teams, I always make sure that the people that I work with, they know if they have a high-profile contact or someone's trying to stir up the pot, they know that, hey, come talk to me first, walk me through it because I've probably gone through it. I'm trained in de-escalating people and de-escalating situations. Let's talk through this. I'm going to review the question quick here. That's okay. I'm answering that. That's how I lead. How would you approach a board meeting that's filled with upset members of the public? Well, okay. So that second question is a big one. I missed that one. I've walked into situations like that as recently as the last couple of years. If I'm walking into it, so if I'm entering into a board meeting and it's a pretty volatile situation, I'm going to get people's attention. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to use nonverbal cues. It's no different than if I walked into a classroom. This happened many times at Girard, where it was it was high octane environment. Okay, there was stuff flying through the classroom. I usually was pretty able to calm them down. We see law enforcement officers do this a lot too. When they're walking into a situation where it's really volatile, they'll separate the groups of people a little bit. So we want to calm them down as much as we can. If we can't maintain order, then we have to start taking some different actions. But I'm pretty confident in my ability to calm down and de-escalate groups of people. I've been trained in LSCI, Life Space Crisis Intervention. I've been trained in TCI, Therapeutic Crisis Intervention, and recently I've been trained in CPI, Crisis Prevention Intervention, all these different acronyms. So over the years we've been trained. I've gone through weeks and weeks of training of de-escalating large group volatile situations. So I'm pretty confident in that.
Okay, Bryan, planning is a core function of the superintendent's role. How would you work collaboratively and with board members and school committees to develop short and long-range plans for the district?
I think I'd utilize survey tools to survey them first, see what their thoughts are, whether it's Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey, Google. Google's slowly becoming my friend. I've had to transition from old school software to Google, but I'm finding I really, really like Google. So finding ways with the community and how they communicate and survey them, making sure communication is also translated if need be. So that's one way I would try and connect with them. And I've been kind of forming together stuff with my dissertation research. I'm trying to reach out to families. That's one thing I didn't mention, that my dissertation work is on how to bring in more family involvement in rural schools, collaborating relationships. The core function is putting together school committees. Yeah, so we've formed committees. Monday night I mentioned that. with the transportation, I formed a transportation committee, and we were able to collaborate with MnDOT and the commissioners to get those bypass lanes. I reached out to the community and I asked them, what do we need to make this safer? And this was one of the ideas the mayor came up with. Long-range and short-term goals. Inviting people in, those stakeholders for those meetings, have those town hall meetings first. So once I've gathered the data, I would then probably schedule a town hall meeting. And it doesn't have to be here, and we can be strategic about it. Those meetings could be downtown or, get down to where the people are, and then show them the data, show them their responses, and then start setting goals with that. And getting that stakeholder input. And then once we've gathered all of that, then we would sit down as a board and discuss, okay, then how are we moving forward with these ideas that are going to drive the decisions that we are going to make. And it could be anything from the bypass lanes I put in, from that to changing curriculum. Curriculum is a hot topic, as we know. I want to hear what families in the community want and how should we be screening that. That's one example on how I would work collaboratively with all those different groups of people, because we can list all the hot topics right now that are in the news that we know that are really stirring up communities. So let's talk about that and how we can improve on that. That's the curriculum one just kind of rolls off the tongue right now because everybody's talking about what's being taught in the schools, and parents want to know, and they have a right to know. So that's one way I would reach out to our communities, is to find out. All right, well, let's start shopping. Okay, if you don't like this book, what sounds better to you? Listening to people and their needs in the community, because again, we are public servants.
Brian, what do you see as the emerging role of technology in educational instruction? Give some specifics regarding how this vision would be implemented in Albert Lea so our students will be able to live, work, and flourish in tomorrow's society.
Yeah, I'm old enough to say that when I was in high school and we had to do a research paper, we used the Dewey Decimal System. My teenage daughters always tease me when I talk about back in the day, and they tease me a lot. And I said, you have the technology at your fingertips that if you need to find an answer to something, you can just push a couple buttons and bam, you can figure out who Charles Darwin was, or who was Ronald Reagan, or what was World War II all about. So we as educators have had to transition a lot and very quickly. With the pandemic, public schools, I don't think there's any other government agency or entity that pivoted and flipped things upside down overnight like our public schools did with fidelity. We did some pretty amazing work as public schools in Minnesota. So with technology, we've also learned that online distance remote learning is not the best humanly possible way to learn. But for some students, they do very well at that. We have over 300 students enrolled in our online school with Goodhue County Ed District. My district alone has about 20 kids that are currently enrolled online. That's just how they flourish. We have some students that just don't do well in a large, condensed classroom environment. So we have to appeal to every child. So with technology rapidly changing, we need to make sure that we're kind of getting involved with that, but at the same time, also respecting the fact that sometimes we have students that do very well with a textbook, a notebook, and a pencil. I'm kind of one of those people too, where I still kind of cling to that old school way of learning, but also I'm very thankful that we do have technology. Technology is also a huge expense. So if we're going to make a decision, if we're moving to putting smart boards in every classroom and having a one-to-one school district, which you kind of have, I believe, I was looking at it right. Those are costs that we have to maintain sustainability with, because those Chromebooks or iPads have to be updated every few years. Web-based software that we're using in the classroom, like IXL, some of those other ones, Class Dojo, those have subscriptions that we have to renew. If we're teaching 6th grade social studies, Northern Lights, which is mandated by the state of Minnesota, that has an ebook component. That's an added expense too that we have to keep resubscribing to. So if we're looking at technology and curriculum in conjunction with blended learning, we have to make sure that we're looking long range down the road and that we are planning for that. Give me something specific regarding vision from infinite live, work, flourish, and prosperity. Well, I think with CTE, getting kids college ready, you know, a large part of our workforce is involved around technology. So we need to make sure that if we have kids that are interested in pursuing careers in that field, that we have those connections at their fingertips. I think what I would bring to the table is my connections with our area colleges and universities, whether it's through student teachers, welcoming them into the district, or just simply getting them in contact with people that are in the IT world. I would embrace our IT department. I would probably propose, I guess my vision would be to take our IT department, whom I have not met yet. I'm not sure how many you have on in that team, but I would try and see if we could schedule time for them to go into the classroom. Show the kids their skills. Maybe we have students here that might become our next IT director here for Albert Lee. So I would make sure that they're getting into touch with people that are already in the field with technology. And then also look at what type of learning structure or what type of technology that we're using. Those are things that I have to like immerse myself in. But one of the things I did when I arrived at my current district was I immediately brought in my IT director and said, okay, what are we doing here? I need you to get me up to speed. I got a television in my office so I could have all the district cameras up there so I could see what's going on. But I think I answered the question. I hope I did anyway. Mm-hmm.
Bryan, discuss the techniques you have found most successful in maintaining and improving quality of curriculum and instruction in schools.
I think, excuse me, I'm currently trying to develop like a curriculum cycle. What I have found in districts, and I was a director of assessments and curriculum, what I have found in districts is that there's a couple problems you have with updating curriculum. You have some teachers that started teaching in the 1980s. You know, they're still on staff with skills that we need to embrace because we need, they're eventually going to retire if they haven't already. A change in curriculum sometimes can cause some stress. So how do we segue them into this blended learning model and new technology? And a lot of that has to do with staff development, making sure that we're fostering the mindset of we are lifelong learners. We need to continuously learn. Even teachers who started teaching in the 90s or the early 2000s, we need to make sure that their voices are being heard and that we are training them for any types of changes that are happening within curriculum. I've always had the mindset, and this is what I've read in articles, that if your textbooks are 7 years old or older, they should probably be updated. If your web-based software is that old, that definitely needs to be updated. Because if we are looking at standardized test scores, or MCA test scores for that matter, it's pretty tough to expect a child to do well on an MCA science test when they're reading from science books or web-based programs with science information that is over 7 years old. They're not going to match the standards, the Minnesota standards that are embedded within that exam. So naturally, they're not going to do well. And I've seen this in many districts with outdated curriculum. There's a correlation between outdated curriculum and MCA test scores because the outdated curriculum is not up to date. It's not up to date with the new standards. We have new social studies standards that are going to be implemented in 2026. We better make sure now in 2022, that we're preparing for that. So that we have to be on top of those things. So that's a big piece of that puzzle with maintaining and improving the quality of curriculum. And we do know there are bad publishers out there. We have to make sure that we're screening those. And it's not just going to come from one office. We need to have a curriculum team, a curriculum committee, I would propose that there be a couple board members on that committee as we screen the curriculum, and make sure that we're making an informed decision. And usually in districts too, you have one subject this year, and then, so it'd be science this year, math next year, because curriculum is very expensive. I've also found that I've had a lot of teachers that have made their own curriculum, and it's blended. And so we've been able to kind of piecemeal things to save districts money, because every district I've been in has been in financial crisis until we got the levy passed and started making changes. But what I found was a lot of our teachers were being very innovative and very creative and borrowing things from other teachers, and they were making it work. And test scores are improving, So we can all be creative. We just need to harness the skills of our staff and move forward with that. So. Mm-hmm.
Bryan, communication, marketing, and branding are becoming increasingly more important as school districts work to attract and retain students, staff, and families. Please provide us with distinct steps you would take to address this need.
What I've done in the past, I alluded to this Monday night. Part of my transition plan that I prepared for you. Hopefully, if we get time, I'll share it with you. What I've done is I immediately contact the local press and media. Okay, I will put together an article, a press release about my initial impressions of the community, the people that I met, the people that I know. Like I said earlier, I was watching the preschool graduation downstairs a couple nights ago. I attended the baseball game here and was just kind of intermingling. I saw Bruce there, said hi to him, we hung out. And so we, just getting to know people, I'll get a sweatshirt that says Alberley Tigers on it, and then getting out there and meeting with people, attending chamber meetings, joining the Kiwanis. I used to be vice president of Kiwanis at a previous school district. Getting involved, I'm on the board for the Eagles clubs. So getting involved with your local clubs and organizations and making sure that I'm broadcasting all the wonderful things we are doing. Be on a weekly radio address. I'm on the radio quite frequently. Like I said, I'm the PR guy, so making sure that I'm getting the word out about all the awesome things we are doing. When I've done that, I've seen increase in enrollment in my current district and my previous district, okay? So those are things that I can do externally out of here to get that brand out there. Retaining staff-wise, I've supervised student teachers for Winona State University in my previous district. Did not have much time to do that this year or the last year and a half. But what I have found, I've been very proud of the fact that when I post a position, we fill it rather quickly with a highly qualified candidate. And it's because of my networking with Min-State. When you bring in student teachers and you get them involved with your school, they tend to want to stick around. And so I've had kind of a direct conduit with our post-secondary institutions, and I can fill them really quickly. Just continue with my doctorate research with the university too, with their graduate programs. So we've been getting pretty highly qualified people in our districts. Let's see. Growing your own. I've been involved with that. I've seen, I started off in education as a paraprofessional myself over 20 years ago. But what I've found is really fun is seeing someone start off as a paraprofessional with an associate's degree and then go to school. I've had a lot of joy in watching working mothers working at the same time, working in a school where their children attend, and then taking online classes at night, and then earning their bachelor's degree in teaching. It's just an absolute joy. So a program like that, just growing your own within. I've seen high school students. I hired a teacher once who graduated high school with a diploma and her associate's degree. And by age 20, I believe when I hired her at age 20, I think she was the youngest teacher in Minnesota, but you couldn't tell. I thought she had years of experience. But those are just amazing stories that I was involved with directly, and I just absolutely loved it. So that's how I would retain and recruit staff, and I've done it, and it's been proven very successful. Attracting families, I've seen that happen in my career just by having a good bedside manner. Having that open door policy where families know from all backgrounds, all different cultures I've worked with, and they feel welcome in my office or wherever I'm at, you know, being an active listener, you know, making sure that when I'm talking to somebody, regardless of their background, my phone's off. In fact, I've got to be more careful now because I'm not wearing it tonight for good reason. I have an Apple Watch, which will go off, and I'm like, no, that's no longer. I have to have all distractions off so that I'm giving them my undivided attention. When families have seen that, even tonight too, just opening the door for a family and talking to them and asking questions, they know I care, and I think that's been very successful. And I don't do that to be successful. I do that because, you know, I love people. So, you're welcome.
All right, I have the next question. How would you establish partnerships with the business community to support the school district? What examples can you cite which indicates your success in gaining community support for educational programs?
I'm one of those people, I actually like doing fundraisers. I've done fundraisers over the years with, like, you know, Cherrydale, and there's a book club, Scholastic. We've done, you know, Scholastic book fairs. I've always directly involved with that, bringing families into the school. As far as the business community goes, you know, I've been a member of a lot of nonprofit organizations. Years ago, I was involved with Moore County Relay for Life, you know, raising money for cancer research. Like I said earlier, I was part of Kiwanis and the Eagles, the Elks clubs. We do a lot of, you know, philanthropy, you know, people helping people. That's the Eagles moniker. And so partnering with them, going to city council meetings, going to Chamber of Commerce meetings. My mother was a member of the Austin Chamber of Commerce for many years as a business owner. Talking to them and attending those events and talking about the school, and then planting the seeds of, like, you know, we're thinking about purchasing a laser engraver or a 3D printer, you know, would you be interested in, you know, participating with that? We can get your name out there. Getting that word of mouth and just mingling with them. Going to a football game, I've sat in the bleachers and just talking to someone, and turns out they're a business owner, and I'm like, well, hey, that's a great business you have there. I got a couple of students that might be interested in doing that. I've also done elementary career fairs. So a lot of times we're seeing high schools and middle schools host career fairs, bringing in attorneys, doctors, custodians, truck drivers, secretaries, and have booths set up. I did this at an elementary level. So why not get the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, firemen, police officers, start, you know, asking them, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always ask kids that in an elementary school. What do you want to be when you grow up? You know, I don't know. Isn't it, you know, it's just kind of fun to hear what they say, and then see if they actually go into that field. You know, hopefully, you know, when you stick around long enough, you can kind of see where kids are going. So when I brought in a career fair to an elementary school, it was in a gymnasium. I even set up a table too. I had my high school diploma on there. I talk about my high school diploma more than in my other degrees. But I had my degrees up there. I had some textbooks, and I talked about what it takes to be a teacher and then become a principal and then be a superintendent. And hopefully that sparks some interest. But a lot of people didn't realize, even parents would be like, wow, I didn't know you had to go to college that long to become a teacher and then a principal. I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of work. But bringing in those career fairs, when you bring all those businesses into the school, and then the kids get to see it, that's a huge connection that you can make, and that will show investment. And then when those businesses and community members come in the school, they can notice things like, geez, you got a leak in the ceiling. I'm like, yep, it's expensive to maintain a school building. That's why I'm asking for your vote this fall. All right, so those are conversations I've had that have been very helpful in communicating with businesses and getting them involved with school, and ultimately financially too. So, yeah, I think I'm done.
Bryan, Everglades demographics are quickly changing. As the new superintendent of our district, how would you go about creating a supportive and inclusive environment for the growing diversity of the schools and community?
Getting involved with the different organizations, seeing if there's a welcoming committee within the city, and seeing if that welcoming committee can also get involved with the school. Have the school district form a welcoming committee. Nothing is more important than somebody who's coming to a new area, especially a new country. They want to feel welcomed. That is a big, big deal. And schools and communities that have had great success in progressing with diversity, that's exactly what they have done. They made sure that the people that were coming there were welcomed into their community and their school. Years ago, I talked about her Monday night because I thought she was a great gal. When our former commissioner, Dr. Brenda Castillas, I was at a I think it was MSBA or MDE conference, and I remember she was the keynote speaker, and I remember her saying at the beginning of the speech, all means all, and that resonated with me. That all means all. I can go back 100 years. I remember my great-grandparents, whose grandparents immigrated from Norway and Denmark, and they grew up in a rural town in Minnesota, southeastern Minnesota, and this was like the 1920s, I think it was, and they tried to go to the school building, and the administrator there was standing at the door and said, you can't come here until you learn English. That's what it was like 100 years ago. And I remember my great-grandparents telling me that. My great-grandparents didn't speak English. They spoke Norwegian. And when I was a little guy, I could speak it pretty good, but as I got older, I lost the skill. But that resonated with me. I'll never forget that story. I'll never forget that story. And they did. They ended up going back to the farm, and somehow, took a couple years, but they were able to get a little bit of English, and they were able to go back to the school. We don't do that today. All means all. We welcome all children into our schools, and we give them the best education we can because we are the best. We are the best, and I've heard nothing but good things about the staff here at Albert Lee area schools, whom a lot of them I know. Here's the other piece of the puzzle, and I did this last year. I have a connection with a gentleman from Winona State University. He's a professor. He's got a PhD, and he's in charge of diversity and inclusion, and he puts together a great presentation. I had him come to my convocation, my back-to-school conference in August, and I said, well, let me see what you're going to present first. I want to make sure, this isn't, too radical. I want to make sure that what you're gearing this towards is towards schools, not a business, but this is a school district with teachers and custodians and bus drivers. And he gave such a good presentation that I'm going to hire him to come back every year. And it wasn't cheap, it cost a few bucks, but his presentation, he showed that cartoon I think I talked about Monday night about the three boys with the three boxes, equality versus equity. And his speech, there was a lot of light bulbs clicking on that people were starting to realize, oh my goodness, we actually, the immigrants and the diversity and the different demographics that are changing here, and that has changed dramatically and very quickly in southern Minnesota. And we can learn from communities that are being very successful with these tactics. My hometown's been very successful. One of the things that brought the community together was the basketball team, sports. School events and activities bring people together. What a great way to do things. And then staff, educating staff, holding events that are free of charge. Just come with an open mind. It's that simple. It can be done. I've seen it done. And if that is a concern here, I'll make sure that's one of my top priorities. And that's also how you build trust. So.
Next question. Assume for a moment that you have completed a long and successful career as the Albert Lee Superintendent of Schools. What would you hope would be the 3 most significant achievements you will be remembered for?
I think that's probably the best question I think I've ever seen in an interview. Number one, I guess, would be that the people knew that I cared very deeply about everyone. And number 2, that people, and I say people because I'm talking about everybody that enters our school buildings, felt safe. So number 1, that I loved and cared very deeply about the people. And number 2 is that I provided, promoted, and endorsed a safe learning environment, because let's be honest, you can't learn anything if you don't feel safe, okay? what happened this week, we know for a fact that the people down in Texas are not, it's gonna be a long time for them to feel safe. But for people to remember me, those top two things are that I loved and cared about kids, everybody felt safe, and number three, I think besides making sure that everyone had a great time learning and learned under my stewardship, I think the biggest thing is that I brought joy to people's lives. I think I've done a lot of that over the years, and I think those are probably my top 3 or 4. But that I cared, that people felt safe, and they had joy in learning. I think those are 3 things that I think people remember me by, and that's a good question. I'm going to keep that one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Bryan, if you are hired as our next superintendent, how would you approach the first few months on the job?
Well, looking at your calendar, you start school in the middle of August, so it's if I'm selected for this position, I sincerely hope I am. You start July 1, and then is it August 15th, I think, it's like, bam. So I better be ready to roll. So I think that was kind of part of this. I guess now, if that's okay with you, if I could just pass this out, and I'll briefly kind of go over it. I won't go over every page, but I think I kind of have the first 2 months kind of mapped out, but I'm not calling it a timeline I'm not calling it a timeline or a 100-day plan or a 60-day plan, because I want this to be a fluid document and open-ended, because I don't know how long it's going to take, but I know I'm only going to have about 6 weeks before I can really get things rolling, because in August, I'm going to have everybody in the auditorium for my, I left my copy there, an auditorium for my opening speech. Let's see, hopefully there's no typos. So the first page is the cover page, and on page 2, you kind of have a sequence of events. It's kind of in that order. I'm not going to read through all those because I'm going to do that individually. On page 2, I actually had this done about a week ago, but I moved some things around. I'm glad I waited to give this to you tonight because of what happened this week. We kind of touched base on this earlier in the interview, but the mental health thing is what I'm going to do the first few months. What I'm going to really do right now, this has got to be a priority. I need to see what this district's doing in addressing mental health of not just students but also staff. I want to make sure that we have systems in place day one. Okay, I have staff right now that are reeling over what happened this week. So we need to make sure that I'm diving right into that. And then the second piece, well, before I get to the second piece, I have on here a couple bullets. We know that our ESSER money can be directly spent on this topic alone. So I'm going to make sure that we're doing that, and then we're also looking at social emotional learning too. And I did see you got second step here. I just purchased about $20,000 worth of second step for my school building alone using the ESSER money. That's what it's meant for, okay? So if we got to send people to staff development or whatever to make sure that we're implementing this curriculum, we're going to make that happen. And what agencies are we partnering with? I'm kind of on a first-name basis with a lot of the local agencies in the area. One of my really good friends owns his own. I know he's directly involved with Freeborn County. I want to see who we're partnering with, if any. The second thing I'm going to dive into is the safety and security. I've done a complete audit of both school districts I've been in. When I was in Lyle, I think I was the only district, I was the first one to sign up with the Moore County Sheriff's Department. I had them come in and do a complete audit of the school building, which was only about 10 years old at the time. And we found some discrepancies in the building. We found some errors, and we corrected them. One of the biggest things we found was that the outside doors weren't numbered. Your doors are lettered here. We also discovered some of the doors weren't locking properly, so we addressed that. Obviously we need to make sure our doors are locked all day, every day. And just recently as today, I discovered that I'm like, why are we unlocking doors at 2:45, before school gets out? Those probably should just stay locked, I also discovered that there's certain doors in school buildings that kids like to keep ajar. We can't allow that, and we need to make sure we communicate with our students that if we just can't keep doors ajar. So I want to do a complete audit of mental health and a complete audit of our school security systems. And there's a lot of software out there, a lot of apps out there with companies that I've met with, and I know we can probably tap into some of those resources. And I have some examples there too of how I've addressed certain problems in the school system, or the previous school district anyway. The third page has got a blue line at the top. Looking at your stakeholder survey, I saw the word trust a lot mentioned in there from your stakeholders. I currently are reading a book. I think this was actually promoted by the MSBA. I'm not 100% sure. It was written by a guy named David Horsager, and it's called The Trust Edge. And basically he says, and I quote him, and it's that trust, not money, is the currency of business and life. And if we can rebuild trust, concentrate on those 8 pillars that you see there, what I would probably do too within the first few months is I would purchase this book for all of you in this room, plus all the administrative staff. Read that book, because there's a lot of good nuggets in there on how we can regain trust, if there's any trust loss with certain people. I think part of my job too as your superintendent is to make sure I'm educating you too. So I might treat you like students, but that's okay. That's okay. How am I doing, boss?
You got 9 minutes.
9 minutes, perfect. 2 other things I'm going to do is that I'm going to schedule inside the organization. I want to meet with the board chair, and then I'd meet with each of you individually and let me hear what makes you tick and what your concerns are, so that you're communicating with me what you would like me to do, and vice versa. I look at the central office leadership team. I would meet with the office support staff. I've met with a few of them. They are super nice. I would meet with the union leaders. I pride myself with having great relationships with them. Other employee groups, I would also want to meet with parents, students, get some donuts and coffee and hang out. I've found one, for me anyway, how to build trust with me is food. I love food, and I've always thought food brings people together. So that's one piece that I would do to get people to sit down at a table. Outside the organization, I just threw down some people that I thought would be really good for me to meet with. The mayor, the city administrator, local reps, city council, local businessmen, police and fire leadership, parents, and press, and I've kind of talked about this before. And I put these down on here because I've done this before, and I've been very successful at that, and it just helps. It just helps to have communication, because you never know when you're going to need some of these people. I mean, because it's a mutual relationship. They need us just as much as we need them. So, and then, let's see here. No other press, I talked about that earlier. That was huge, and getting a levy pass is huge, and dealing with natural disasters and getting the word out properly, getting ahead of that narrative so people aren't, making things up, including with the public relations. Publish a newsletter. I need to do more of this, but this is something too that I want to do right away. If I'm selected for this position, I'm going to give my initial impression. I'll contact the Albert Lee Tribune and communicate with them who I am, what I'm seeing, all the wonderful things, and just introduce myself so people can put a name with a face and they can see who I am. They can see that I am a daddy, that I have 3 kids, that I can relate to what they've been going through the last couple of years. People are going to want to get to know me. I want to make sure that happens. Yeah, let's kind of sum that up, I guess. And then I threw this in here just kind of as an example, but fiscal responsibility, just continue to review. I think it was maybe Dennis, you mentioned keeping that fund balance, keeping the 10 to 12%. I've always been told, working with business managers, that we should at least have about 3 months worth of payroll in the piggy bank. It's just kind of best practice. I see you use Board Book. That's a good way to keep that transparency alive so people can access public documents. CTE and Workforce Ready, this is a big deal. While I was on the Perkins Grant Committee, when I was working with your administration here from, I think it was like 2019 and 2020, I walked into kind of a volatile situation when I was appointed board chair there, because there was a gentleman on that team that kind of left some money on the table, And I was begging, when I was in line, I was kind of begging to get like a 3D printer, and I didn't know this money was there, so I'm like, okay, we need to address this because this is federal money. So I've kind of dealt with that as being on part of the Perkins Committee. I also went and looked at what you have for concurrent classes. I have a great relationship with the deans, the president of Riverland. They know me very well. So when I was looking at, you are the largest enrollment for concurrent. You have a lot of like health sciences stuff. So I was just kind of thinking, I was talking with some people at Riverland. I'm like, why don't we create a pathway with those concurrents so that students can get dual credit at like nursing, for example. So Riverland just recently partnered with Owatonna. Okay, so why can't we tap into that? Why can't we add to the menu? So those are things too that I'm trying to remember from Monday night. I think it was Bruce. You mentioned that you're big in college and career ready. You want to expand on those courses. So I thought of you when I was having those conversations with Riverland, and so let's make that happen. And yeah, you're the largest district that partners with Riverland, and I threw Perkins down there. Recruiting and retaining staff. I talked about that earlier. How I have a pretty good pipeline with Mint State, and then promoting professional development and lifelong learning, and promoting the Albert Lee brand. And inviting student teachers here. We want them to feel welcome here. It's a lot of fun doing that. Student enrollment was one of the concerns I saw in the survey. As we know, we've lost more students. I think it was last year we lost 20,000 students statewide in public school. Actually, it was 23,000 public school students we lost in the state of Minnesota. So we have a lot of districts experiencing decline enrollment. So what are things that we can do to combat that? And one of those things, just an idea I threw out there, is on the very next page, scholarships. I'd like to take a look at what we have for scholarships on the books. There's a community to the east here that has an assurance scholarship where you get your first 2 years covered, as long as you go to that high school for 4 years. I don't know why we couldn't have something like that here. That's something that I was really thinking hard about this week. I'm like, okay, if I'm selected for this position, how could I make that happen? That would be that community commerce, reaching out to the businesses and pulling our resources together and seeing how we could partner with our post-secondary institutions to help our kids out, because as we know, tuition just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. And then 5 minutes. Well, that's good because I'm on the last page. Wrapping it up. This is just in conclusion. All decisions that I make from top to bottom will be student-focused on what's best for kids. I will be your voice and advocate for the district at the local, state, and federal levels. I have connections on all those levels already. And again, like I said earlier, I label this as a transition plan rather than a 100-day plan because I don't want to put a limit on it, and I'm only going to have, if I'm selective, I'm only going to have about a month and a half to get rolling. And I'm a go-getter. I'm pretty progressive that way, but that's why I did not put a finite number on this. So that is all I have for that. That was number 16. 16.
You got one more to go. What questions would you like to ask the rest of the board?
Holy cow. All right. Well, there's some I didn't get to on Monday. Let's see. You might have kind of touched base on this. What are the key issues you think the school system must confront, and why is this important to you? What is a hot ticket item that you're like, okay, Boysen, we need you to roll with this and work on it?
Well, you touched on it.
I think, yeah, mental health, okay.
I would add the learning gap.
Learning gaps. Okay. And to do that, that's something that I'm doing a lot of reading up on. To do that, we need to have a great relationship with Human Services field. Great relationship with them and the county, because we got to help families out as much as we can. Get them in contact with those people. That's been a proven strategy to narrow or rid that gap. And then I guess unless somebody missing, I think we already kind of talked about that one. And then how can I assist you in maximizing your effectiveness as a school board member? Like, how can I help you besides doing the one-on-ones and talking to you, is there something that you'd like the superintendent to do to really make your roles stick out and get things done as a board?
To me, simply just be available.
Okay.
Whenever.
Yep.
Because issues do come up.
Yep.
The civilians say liquid anymore.
Yeah.
Like with the COVID issues 2.5 years ago, whenever that came up, it was, had to be dealt with, and some dealt with it quicker than others.
Yeah, just kind of keeping you abreast of anything that's happening. Weekly communication, maybe like a Friday summary of what I did during the week, something like that, okay.
All right. I also agree with the point on communication, but I think it would be helpful to have communication about what's coming up down the road
Oh,
so that I
yeah.
can talk to people in advance and
Yep.
get thoughts and
Yeah.
ideas composed versus just being surprised
Sure.
3 days before the meeting.
I was just gonna say, yeah, that's one thing, 5 years, my first year, it's always hard, and that was one thing I learned very quickly, is that board members don't want to be caught off guard. So I want to keep you guys informed. Yeah, you'll have my cell phone.
Okay.
Is that it? Rock and roll. Good job, man. Thank you all. Appreciate it, yeah. Oop. Throwing stuff.